neonatal unit. Exclusion criteria: infants with no heart rate at 10 minutes of age despite adequate resuscitation, major life-threatening congenital malformations, or if the parents were unable to attend the follow-up assessments. These babies were excluded from the studies. Randomization: web-based randomization using OPEX in sealed envelope is used. Parental consent obtained before randomization. The control group received usual neonatal intensive care. Hypothermia group, along with the neonatal intensive care, had controlled reduction of their rectal temperature to 33.5 degrees Celsius for 72 hours, followed by automated rewarming at 0.5 degrees Celsius per hour. The machine uses servo-controlled whole body cooling device, Tecotherm Neo. Masking of the intervention was not possible, and magnetic resonance biomarker analysis and neurodevelopmental outcome assessments were masked to the assessors. Clinical protocols for supportive intensive care were standardized in both the groups. A single perinatal pathologist masked to the treatment allocation examined all umbilical cord for pneumocystis. Hypothermia discontinued in case of refractory hypotension, life-threatening or massive hemorrhage, or on parental or clinician request. Daily encephalopathy staging was done till day 4 after birth and again on day 7 and at discharge of the baby. Cerebral MRI was done between 7 to 14 weeks after birth, as earlier told, by 3 Tesla scanner. The MRI sequence comprised of T1 and T2 weighted sequences and diffusion tensor MRI and MRS determining metabolic peak area ratios and metabolic absolute concentrations. All MR images reported jointly by 2 neonatal neurologists, masked to all clinical information with additional input from pediatric neuroradiologist. A neurodevelopmental pediatrician masked to the allocation assessed each infant at 18 to 22 months using Bailey's third edition and detailed neurological examination. For infants who could not be assessed in person, parents were contacted over telephone and collected clinical information using ASQ. But information obtained through this questionnaire is used only for data regarding mortality. It was not taken into account for other outcomes. So the primary outcome of a study is composite outcome comprising death or moderate or severe disability. Defining severe disability as using Bailey's third edition, cognitive composite score of less than 70. Other things used to define severe disability are gross motor function classification system level 3 to 5, profound hearing impairment, recurring hearing aids or cochlear impairment, or blindness. The same way, moderate disabilities is classified based on Bailey's score of 70 to 84 and other parameters like GM, function classification system level 2 and other things. Secondary outcomes, there are short-term secondary outcomes and then long-term secondary outcomes, and there were MRI and exploratory outcomes. Long-term secondary outcomes are death from any cause at 18 months, severe disability as defined before among those who survived, microcephaly assessed at 18 to 22 months. So short-term secondary outcomes are death before hospital discharge, or bleeding like IVH, gastric bleed, or pulmonary hemorrhage, or coagulopathy requiring blood products, cardiac arrhythmia, PPHN, persistent metabolic acidosis, renal failure, abnormal neurological examination at discharge, and duration of hospital stay. MRI outcomes based on biomarkers were brain injury scores on a conventional T1, T2 weighted images on MRI, thalamic absolute N-acetyl acetate concentration, or peak ratio of between lactate and N-acetyl acetate creatinine, and N-acetyl acetate choline peak ratios. Exploratory outcomes as defined before: moderate disability or survival without disability and follow, persistent seizure disorder, disabling cerebral palsy, blindness, hearing impairment, or severe microcephaly, wasting, and stunting. These are all the other secondary outcomes. Sample size was calculated based on the requirement to reduce the relative risk in 30% in the primary outcome, from 50% in the control group to 35% in the intervention group, with the power of 80% and two-tailed 5% significance level. Considering for 10% loss on follow-up, the required sample size was determined to be 204 infants per group. Statistical analysis was done based on intention to treat. Categorical outcomes were analyzed based on chi-square or Fisher-Exact test. The difference between outcome for the categorical outcomes were quantified with risk ratios with corresponding 95% confidence interval. For continuous outcome with non-parametric distribution, Mann-Whitney test is used. For comparing survival survival between the two groups, log rank test is used for statistical analysis. Ordinal logistic regression analysis is used to compare brain injury between the two groups. A separate independent data monitoring committee masked to the treatment allocation monitored the progress of the trial every 6 months during the study. So this is a study flowchart. Initially, it started with 2,296 infants. 1,721 were excluded in view of weight or gestational age, or there is no encephalopathy. Among them, 576 were eligible. Among 576, 67 were declined consent, and one 101 patient cooling device was not available. So 408 were randomly assigned, 202 to the hypothermia group, 206 to the control group. 7 patients did not have primary endpoint available in the hypothermia group, among which 4 lost to follow-up and 3 assessed only by ASQ questionnaire, so which for data which was not taken into primary outcome. In the hypothermia group, 5 patients lost to follow, 2 assessed only by ASQ questionnaire. So at the end, 195 patients analyzed for the primary endpoint and 199 patients analyzed for the primary endpoint in the control group. So this table showing the baseline characteristics of the two parity, which almost matches in both groups, not much difference between the two groups. Some baseline characters were not matching, like pregnancy-induced hypertension was more in hypothermia group, and perinatal sentinel events as a whole was less in both the groups. Like in hypothermia group, only 8% patients, babies had perinatal and sentinel events documented, like cord prolapse or cord around group. So without saying, most of the babies don't have documentation or details regarding perinatal sentinel events. And emergency cesarean delivery is more among the hypothermia group. And the more important thing, altogether, almost 70% of the babies included in the trial in both the arm were from outbound hospitals, referred from other hospitals. Other significant differences therein, like other significant things are like study include almost 20% SGA babies, and the last and the more striking thing is the difference in temperature between hypothermia and control group. It is almost 0.6 to 1 degree Celsius difference between differences there in between hypothermia and control group at all level of encephalopathy. It is 35.7 degrees Celsius in hypothermia group and 36.4 in control group. Indirectly telling most of the babies are from outbound hospital, from outside hospital, and the transport facility was not good, since most of the babies are from outbound hospital. So results, primary and secondary outcomes. Primary outcome, the composite outcome of death or moderate or severe disability. It is 98 in hypothermia group, 94 among control group, which was not statistically significant. In secondary outcomes, death till until 18 months, it is 84 among hypothermia group, 63 among control group. It is statistically significant. Risk ratio with confidence interval of 1.04 to 1.076, it is above 1, and p values 0.02. Other exploratory outcomes like disability, survival with disability, difference in cognitive, motor, and language score in Bailey's third edition. Though the scores were not statistically significant, number of babies with disability is more in control group. Although explanation can be given other ways, since mortality is more in hypothermia group. So if only babies have survived in the hypothermia group, that would have resulted in more neurological disability in hypothermia and hypothermic group also. So that was the explanation given in the paper also. And other secondary outcomes like gastric bleeding, persistent hypertension, pulmonary hemorrhage, PPHN, cardiac arrhythmia, severe thrombocytopenia, persistent metabolic. So most of the secondary outcomes were were more in hypothermia group compared to control group, and all of those are statistically significant also, with the risk ratio and p value going hand in hand with each other. So the mortalities are different in hypothermia, which is greater in hypothermia group compared to control group, all throughout the study period, as visually shown by Kaplan-Meier survey analysis. So hypothermia group, the number of babies survived throughout the study period were less than the control group till the age of 18 months. MRS outcome parameters like NA to peak ratio, colon peak ratios, there is not much difference between the two groups in MRI outcome parameters also, in conventional imaging sequences and also in MRS sequences. So coming to discussion part, therapeutic hypothermia with optimal neonatal intensive care could even reduce the composite primary outcome of death or moderate or severe disability, but resulted in increased mortality irrespective of the place of the delivery, or perinatal sentinel events, growth restriction, or coexistence sepsis. Apart from that mortality, secondary outcomes were also worse in the cooled infants like hypotension, metabolic acidosis, thrombocytopenia, coagulopathy, and bleeding incidences. So one of the explanation given for increased incidence of death in the control hypothermic group might be related to hypothermia-induced suppression of hepatic metabolism in an already compromised liver, leading to persistent metabolic acidosis and myocardial depression. As already told, MRI biomarker data do not suggest any beneficial effect of hypothermia in brain injury as per this study. And 80% of infants in Helix trial had white matter injury, which is suggestive of subacute or partial prolonged hypoxia. So in which case, hypothermia may not be neuroprotective. Basal ganglia injury, which is suggestive of acute intrapartum hypoxic event, was seen only in 25% of the Helix trial patients. Poor maternal nutrition, especially anemia, which is prevalent in South Asia, may be a contributing factor for subacute hypoxia in all these patients. Strengths of the study, as it already mentioned, it is a large and well-powered sample size. It has used servo control cooling device, and it has used advanced imaging techniques in MRI. And there is very minimal protocol deviation, and adequate follow-up with neurodevelopmental assessment has been carried out till the age of 18 months with minimal loss to follow-up. Limitations, one of the limitation, it is done in all the three countries in only in government tertiary care hospital. Not even one accredited private care hospital was taken into the study, where care might be equal to high income countries. And enrolled neonates in hypothermia group were more sick, suggested by they were more acidotic, they were more hyperglycemic, and they had requirement of more inotropes. So the patients would have been more sick from beginning in hypothermic group. And as already told, almost 70% of the patients included in the trial were outborn patients. Questioning regarding the adequacy of resuscitation during birth, perinatal care, and transport facility, since there is a high incidence of hypothermia in the hypothermic group. And other things are most infants in the clinical trial had clinical seizure within few hours of birth. So already an intrahepatic hypoxia is going on, which might have started several hours before birth. In preclinical models, onset of seizures indicates secondary energy failure, and inducing hypothermia after secondary energy failure might not be neuroprotective. Other limitation which we feel are the details regarding the treatment of shock, details regarding sedation protocol were not mentioned in the trial. Point of care ultrasound and screening echo, where it was not used or not, was not mentioned in the trial. And as it was already mentioned, there are high proportion of LVW or SGA neonates, and most enrolled neonates were outborn. So coming to the CAS checklist for RCT. So among the 11 questions, study is almost adhering to almost all the questions. It clearly focuses the research question. It satisfies the PICOT format. Almost all the patients assigned were randomized. Though that intervention was not blinded from it was not possible. Outcome parameters like neurodevelopmental assessment and MRI outcome parameters were blinded from the assessors. So almost all the patients who entered the study were accounted for in conclusion. It was analyzed using intention to treat analysis. This other things are like study groups were similar, though plenty of them are outbounds. It is both the groups had almost equal number of outbounds, and other characters were almost matched between the two groups. Effects of intervention were reported comprehensively, including all the details regarding statistical analysis. Confidence intervals were reported, and experimental intervention, as from the high HIC studies, outweigh the harms and cost of the intervention. Since it is being done in our own country, can be applied to our local population, and it satisfies the 11 criteria also. So Helix trial was concluded contrary to the studies from high income countries and other previous studies done in LMIC, which were showing beneficial effect of hypothermia. The conclusion of Helix trial is like it has no benefit on death or mortality. Instead, it increases the mortality per se in hypothermic group. That's how Helix trial was concluded. So I'd like to discuss few things more after what happened after Helix trial is published. But this is a review article published in IJP. Actually, temporal wise, this article got published before the Helix trial. And the results of Helix trial were analyzed in this article. As one primary first author of Helix trial is also part of the authors group in this review article. So in this review article, though temporal temporarily it got released before Helix trial. Some few bold statements were made, like Helix trial is a new benchmark for all the clinical trials ever done in LMIC. And before even its publication, it was proclaimed if therapeutic hypothermia practice can be considered a small practice. And some generalized statements were made that credibility of the entire data from the LMIC were questioned. And even Cochrane and ILCOR were not freed from criticism. Even Cochrane meta-analysis, which was published in 2013, and ILCOR guidelines of 2015 are also criticized. And there is a generalized statement regarding all the most of the LMIC trials are done by postgraduate students, though the author has not provided evidence or any reference for these statements like this. So after the Helix trial, since it is the results of the Helix trial is against the practices which is happening in LMC, lot of questions about the Helix trial happen. Few important things are uh, questions regarding the low number of sentinel events, as we already discussed, and the low number of COT pH in the trial group, and fragility index is 3. Number of neonates lost to follow-up were 5, and number of LAMA were 7. So uh, fragility index is the minimum number of patients whose status would have to change from a non-even to even, that is required to turn a statistically significant result to a non-significant result. So if, for example, in the control group, if the number of deaths were increased by 3, the significant results of Helix trial in the mortality would have turned non-significant, would have crossed the null line. So considering fragility index 3 and the number of units lost to follow-up were 5 and the number of patients who went on LAMA were 7, so which should be taken against the adverse outcome, the results might have been different if things would have gone the other way. And one more thing is the primary author has involved, has done a study in 2013, which is an RCT, though it is a small sample size, roughly 33. Even in that study, the mortality is twice when compared to control arm. In spite of this, knowing this background, interim analysis was not planned when at the beginning of the Helix trial. And since most of the patients are outborn babies, 70% of the neonates do not have proper antenatal or peripartum care and transport facilities. So after all these things, our NNF has released a position statement in October. So conclusions they are given are therapeutic based on the studies from LMIC and HIC. Conclusions drawn are therapeutic hypothermia is likely to decrease death or severe disability and cerebral palsy at 18 to 24 months. But there is significant heterogeneity in the studies from LMIC, and it is attributed to lack of certainty of the diagnosis of asphyxia and asphyxial encephalopathy. So when they done subgroup analysis of all studies from LMIC, studies with COD pH of less than 7 and with moderate severe NHIE from LMIC shown no significant heterogeneity. And there is significant benefit in favor of therapeutic hypothermia, and the results go hand in hand with the studies from HIC. I'll come again. Subgroup analysis done from the network forest plot done from the studies from LMIC, involving only studies with infants with moderate and severe HIE and having COD pH of less than 7. So these studies with in LMIC and HIC go hand in hand. In fact, LMIC had literally much risk ratio of much better than HIC. But if they analyzed only studies with other studies with unclear evidence of asphyxia, like if the studies involved newborn babies with COD pH more than 7, or if studies involved without with babies who don't have COD pH, there is uncertainty of evidence or benefit from the TH, therapeutic hypothermia, ranging from benefit to harm. Helix style was included in this subgroup analysis. The conclusion drawn from those things is possible effects of ethnicity, biological factors, and difference in intrauterine exposures and outcome of neonates with moderate and severe HAE would need further investigation. So question state from NNF have also given the criteria should apply before starting therapeutic hypothermia. So therapeutic hypothermia should be offered to those babies, including all of these. Like baby should have been more than gestation 36 weeks with less than 6 hours of life, temperature of 36 to 37.4 degrees Celsius, either cord or arterial blood gas done within or base excess of more than 16, and Apgar score less than 5 at 10 minutes or at least 10 minutes of positive pressure ventilation, and history of acute perinatal events such as placental abruption, uterine rupture, or such as cord collapse. Along with these, baby should have evidence of moderate or severe encephalopathy. So all the above should be present to offer therapeutic hypothermia. And exclusion criteria: those who are moribund, major congenital or genetic abnormalities, neonate with severe intrauterine growth reduction, severe coagulopathy, evidence of severe head trauma, intracranial hemorrhage. It was not clearly specified regarding exclusion criteria, like whether they mean severe IUGR or whether they mean severe SGA, and whether it is less than 3rd centile or if it is less than 10th centile. And severe definition of severe coagulopathy is not clear. And the other exclusion criteria like ICH also, whether it was meant for intracerebral hemorrhage, if it was meant for subarachnoid hemorrhage, those details are also not available. Device recommendation from the position statement is it is recommended that servo control device should be the preferred cooling device. However, if non-servo control devices such as gel packs or phase change material devices are used, then it would be necessary to have 1:1 as well. But before we go ahead, like we have to have some clarity regarding the exclusion criteria, and even the inclusion criteria. Though NNF has tried its best to avoid the heterogeneity and there is a thing to avoid medical implication. Inclusion criteria seems to be so stringent, which where all the inclusion criteria which were defined previously with the R cutoff were made with AND cutoff. So with this stringent criteria, are we going to include only severe encephalopathy patients with the hypothermia, the outcome will be bad. And if we include only severe encephalopathy patients, the whole purpose of therapeutic hypothermia to pay babies with moderate to severe encephalopathy will be defied. So there is plenty of questions to be answered. So I conclude with this. It is now open to discussions from the delegates and my colleagues.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Balakrishnan, for this wonderful presentation. And truly, we are now at a point where we really don't know, do we go ahead with the NNF position statement? And if we go ahead with that, you have already seen what it says and what all should be there. So maybe some babies where we do not have the cord pH or the 1 hour pH, we may not be able to include those who are eligible babies, but we will not be able to include. And so also with all the and, as he has beautifully described, it seems that we are targeting the severe most affected babies. So are we defining the whole purpose of therapeutic hypothermia? So this is open for discussion. And as we can see, there are more than 50 people who are logged in. So I would really ask people to give in their opinion as to what would be the future of therapeutic hypothermia in LMICs, and especially in our country, which is in India.
For mortality, weightage for mortality was given to more towards a particular one or two centers.
And I think we are all aware that the two centers that Bala is mentioning, both of them are centers which are extramural, where babies are coming from outside and they don't have their own birthing cohort. So most babies that have been included from these two centers have been outborn babies who were referred to them, and they were included. Of course, the inclusion criteria as per the Helix trial were followed, but yes, those were the outborn babies. So do we have anybody from the faculty who
yeah, see, there are a couple of comments, Sushma, Divakar.
Yeah, Divakar, please.
You see, I had some fundamental questions about first of all, the terminology LMIC should never have been used, because the LMIC is not only these two countries or three countries. There is Africa, so many other countries. So the sort of blanket statement for the entire world is probably taking extremely tubular vision about any of these things, because you are blanketing it for the entire world is getting blanketed on a type of study that is a little bit beyond the thing, because it is a sort of supercilious approach to a small study that has been done by any international standards. Number two, what they have done here is some critical questions were asked by my statistician, so I just want to put it up here. If anybody has got it. For example, the sample size calculation has not been very clearly mentioned how they took it. Was it Cox regression based or ordinal logistic regression? What is the criteria they have taken? Because this is a study which has got international repercussions, so it should have been very clearly mentioned. Then, did they actually call it a multicentric study? I don't think so. It's because was proportionate sampling done from each study, each center? It has not been clarified. And why no justification why majority of samples came from India? There's no justification for that. Then how was the heterogeneity actually maintained and minimized or accounted for? These are basic study designs itself. There have been errors. And of course, they did not do a per protocol analysis. Probably they felt there's no violation of the protocols. And also, why are they avoiding? They have not mentioned anywhere that this is a multicentric study in the article. I think when you critically read it. And sample size calculation for multi-center clinical trial is different, where a sample size is based on the size of the center, because you have to have equal proportionate involvement in each center. So a lot of technical errors were there right in the go in this particular study itself. And they have made it very clear that, very nicely put, that the support was 1:4 was a nursing care. And at the same time, they have mentioned that these are centers which are all accredited large centers. It's fair enough, because we all know the workload that is being taken care of in all these places. My greater worry is why the NNF suddenly decided to put the AND criteria instead of the OR criteria.
Exactly. Because that's why we wanted this presentation to be there. And
because suddenly NNF seems to have, putting its feet in both the boats, afraid to contradict.
Very defensive.
Afraid to contradict. At the same time, you want to make a statement, because if you put an AND criteria, like nobody should do anything. Like exactly. if you're in other words, you are telling that somebody who's having a COT pH of less than 7 and who require resuscitation, but did not have any of the other criteria met and has got encephalopathic changes, should not have hypothermia, because then you are medically liable. So NNF has brought out a statement which has actually crucified the people who are doing hypothermia. It is not, whereas the other one, we could have argued our way out, saying that this is a study which has not been done in India. Those are only recommendations. But NNF as a national body has come up with a statement which actually killed hypothermia in our country. They should not have, I think it was not debated around properly at all. And that was a state, it's a national body. A national body gives a statement. It has got medical legal implications.
True.
So they should have probably, made it a justifiable comment and told, okay, it should be done in centers where this is the ratio, or it should be done only in inbound centers or something like that. Some criteria they could have put. But when they put this very, very strict criteria of and,
True.
it's like in any legal minded fellow can immediately catch up and tell you that what you have done is not acceptable. So that is as far the NNF is concerned. And the other one, I find it a bit more of a joke of a study, because you cannot do a study in a group of population which is so restricted to one single study and then blanket it for the entire world and say low and middle income countries. That means you take away 80% of Africa, about 65% of the rest of Asia, and then you say that this is them. And I think that is a highly exalted opinion about one's own research ability. That's to say the least. It could at most it could have been told as, okay, this requires further review. Number two, the same observation had come in an earlier study by the same author, that had been done in Calicut Medical College. So it's like reiterating one's own findings. Like, you quote your own article over and over again. So these are the few things of the individual based I felt, but I think NNF, I personally felt a bit let down by this inclusion criteria that I mentioned, which made us more helpless than the original comments of the LMIC. That was what my burst feeling was.
No, I think absolutely pertinent points, and these are the ones that came to our mind. And when we read the position statement, and we said, okay, let's discuss this. There is an opportunity of this journal club, so let's present the journal and discuss these positions, this position statement from NNF. You very rightly pointed out that it is restricting the hands of people who are now doing hypothermia, and if anything goes wrong, and you can be legally in a very big suit. So probably this is something in haste. It's
one
like,
more,
I mean,
one
there
more
was
comment.
some hurry to come out with a position statement.
And one more comment is, this particular criteria is met with, it will only reinforce the LMIC thing, because you will be handling only severe hypothermia. I mean, severe asphyxia. So it reinforces the LMIC study.
Yeah, that's what we mentioned in the last slide.
Yes,
that
correct.
Are we defining the whole purpose?
That. Correct.
Are we defining the whole purpose of doing hypothermia? Because then we are including only the severest of the babies.
Correct.
Thank you, Dr. Diwakar.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Also, ma'am, I would like to have one comment about this actually, ma'am. Because, ma'am, in this study, we are comparing LMIC results with the high-income countries. So actually, that comparison also is not correct as far as like I am concerned. Because, ma'am, in high-income countries, the good perinatal care is being given from the very first minute of the life. And 70% of the babies who were enrolled in this study were outbounds, although they were randomized in both the groups. But ma'am, we cannot compare it with the results of the high-income countries, where the excellent perinatal services are there, actually, ma'am. Because our babies have not received first-minute care only, and even the transport was not good. So how can we compare our results with the high-income countries, ma'am? That is the one thing I would like to tell.
No, fair enough. But you have a point there that how are we comparing? But even if we are comparing the results with whatever has been presented in Helix, we should analyze it much more scientifically than looking at it in a manner that, okay, this is LMIC, this is dumb, they don't do it well, and they don't know how to do research, and they only postgraduates do it. So I think the whole presentation of the editorial as well as the other comments, they were just not in good light. Yeah, Dr. Diwakar, I see.
Yeah, I think we should not lower our dignity by discussing the poor standards of what they're writing. But let us be a devil's advocate once, why the whole thing came up. Unfortunately, this therapeutic hypothermia started becoming an excuse for proper resuscitation. So instead of stressing on appropriate resuscitation, there have been many centers who have even started off like cooling right from the word before when the baby is born, and maintaining the temperature low and all those things. And perhaps there was a compromise, feeling that, okay, the center has got therapeutic hypothermia, we can be a bit more casual on the research. That might be a factor which could have been cross-checked in these events, because like it was rightly said by the person who said earlier, in outbound patients, the research component might not have been satisfactory. And therefore, that is why you should have taken only, like your first statement that you made, you should have done the study only in places where there were inborn babies, not from outbound babies, because I do not know whether the original Helix trial, the original, our Sita Chandran study, how many of them had taken outbound patients, because I really wanted to go and do a sectarian map of the hospitals they had taken in the study, and how many of these came from poorer areas, the inner city areas, and how much of the ex utero transfers done. Because unless every study should be similar to the previous study to make commentary on that study. So you cannot, take some other fruit, not even apples and oranges. They're discussing pineapples and oranges here, and then commenting that something is very big, and then commenting pineapple should not be peeled with your hand and all those things. It looks quite ridiculous. So anyway, I hope you are sitting in Delhi and you can, your group can do it. And I think most of the studies are being done abroad also only by fellows. And I don't think any of the consultants directly are involved in it. And it's a very poor feeling to say that postgraduates don't have brains in our country. They're equally competent and they're as smart as anybody else. So why should a postgraduate be looked down upon because PGs are doing the study? I mean, that's the most stupid statement I've heard. They're more sincere probably. And I think you should, sitting in Delhi, raise some more noise about revising of the NNF guideline, NNF statement. Otherwise, unless we all collectively criticize it, there's nothing which says NNF statement should not be criticized. I think we should publish it. This comment should be published, and because the whole criteria of therapeutic hypothermia, you are taking away from the original criteria and putting a new criteria here, which is not acceptable. Therapeutic hypothermia was not for this at any stage. So I think all best wishes to LHMC, and we will all lend our support. Okay.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else who wants to put in? I think Ali Melu has mentioned something in the chat. Ali Melu, would you like to speak up?
Yeah, good evening, ma'am. Already it was mentioned in the pre-PTA presentation as well. I think they've included so many of the SGA babies, which would would have a subacute HIE changes. So I think though that was a bigger bias as well. So and because outborn, maybe we wouldn't know whether they would have an acute or a subacute incident before admission. Because even, as you know, even we have a unit where we take in a lot of outbounds. So many of things are not under our control. So I think that's also a major defect in this study, as I think, in the selection. If we take in a lot more inborn cases, I think they would be still under our control. Even if it is a PG who's doing the study, he would go and attend the call. There's nothing wrong in, even if it's a postgraduate, somebody who's doing study, who's more focused would actually, so many things would be under our control, and the variables also would be a little more restrained instead of so many variants and affecting the study.
Yeah, I think you're very right. Very similar thoughts are coming up. Similar thing has been presented. Dr. Divakar also mentioned that. You're also saying this. And the fact that we wanted to kind of present it and have a discussion around is that when we read it and so we felt that this is too stringent, first thing. And second thing, the trial per se, I think we need to discuss more on that as to what is the heterogeneity and why we are getting this kind of result. So he's very right that we should have discussion more on that rather than coming up with a statement which is kind of in haste.
I truly agree, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Alimani.
Yeah.
Madam, may I speak? Veer Raghavan here, madam.
Please welcome, Veer.
Hello, madam. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
I mean, I just wanted to convey that we have a set of authors who have done a randomized control trial, and many of us are close to us as well. And they have taken a stand, which is which might or might not be right. You have a advisory body who comes out with a position statement, and the title headed as being a set of guidelines. NNF is already coming out with clinical practice guidelines. I had the opportunity to discuss this particular document, which will be published, I think, in the coming times, with 4 authors who are involved in different guidelines. And if you include the NNF as well, 5 bodies. All of them were of uniform view that a position statement is superficial, may not use the term should not, because our advisory body is coming out with proper clinical practice guidelines on every aspect of care. Such a controversy has arisen on hypothermia. As a clinician, I could take objective decisions based on a CPG, which has a certainty of evidence through the grade process, and strength of recommendation, which is more transparent. So that was my discussion.
Yeah, right. No, rightly so. When we have the CPG guidelines coming, what was the haste of coming up with a position statement? We could have given this task to a group has been done earlier, and they could have worked on it. It would have taken a little while, but they could have come out with clinical practice guidelines related to therapeutic hypothermia in perinatal asphyxia.
Yes, ma'am. And position statements, they don't gel well. If you see the literature, many authors say that it's better to come out with a CPG rather than a position statement, and not to mix expert consensus or guidelines. Don't use terminologies that are quite confusing to the readership. I think NNF, the authors are quite senior. This guidelines were made by people who are also involved in Helix trial. They are all senior most people from our country. We should give importance to that as well, but it would have been nice if it was accompanied by strength of evidence and the certainty of evidence backing the strength of recommendation. Thank you, madam.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Veer, for that very pertinent comment. And I also feel that maybe this could have been circulated to a few centers or maybe more centers, and could have taken inputs before kind of publishing the position statement. But now that it's come out, it was quite a, something which was quite significant, that it's all and how does one go about now taking up the baby for therapeutic hypothermia. Thank you. Anybody else who would like to say something?
Good evening, ma'am. I just want to make one comment that NNF itself has mentioned in its position statement that if we exclude the heterogeneity, so if we include only studies which have clearly mentioned their inclusion criteria like pH and all these things, if we take only inborn babies, then the outcome with therapeutic hypothermia are comparable with the high-income countries. So rather than restricting the whole criteria for selection, we should look for the variables which are associated with poor outcome of hypothermia. We can the selection criteria can be wiser if we select only the inborn babies or only the babies who have clear resuscitation seen, or maybe if we find out in a subgroup analysis that the SGA babies are not doing good with hypothermia, then we can restrict it to only the appropriate for gestational age babies, rather than restricting the whole criteria. And especially the last point where they have mentioned that the acute perinatal event should be there, like the cord prolapse or abruption of the placenta. So that is very rare to find, because in Helix trial also and in other trials also, the incidence for the acute perinatal event is only like 10% or 20%. So the that is the most restricting for us to start therapeutic hypothermia.
Yes, it's good to hear from the DM residents that yes, they are responding to what has been published and they have been reading what's come up. So that's really heartening. And yes, you are echoing the same sentiments that have been spoken till now. So I think we are all speaking in unison as to what the position statement says and what it could have or should have said, which would have been better to promote therapeutic hypothermia for the deserving baby rather than restricting it and kind of making it something which is complete no-no. Yeah, anybody else who would like to express?
Ma'am, agreeing with what thing, is it not very difficult to assume that all these neonates who were born in another setup, they were high risk and they would have been assessed in that setup, then transported, discharged, and then readmitted in another setup. And then we assume that timely hypothermia was started in these neonates within those 6 hours. And what supports this assumption? And it is really hard to believe because those setups didn't even have an adequate cord pH taken in neonates who were asphyxic inside the delivery room. So it's really hard to believe that most of the study neonates were outborns, and it's just hard to believe how timely intervention or timely therapeutic hypothermia would have been initiated in those neonates. I mean, amplitude integrated EEGs were not done. Maybe a lot of them had clinical seizures by the time therapeutic hypothermia was initiated. And it's just that, as sir said, a sectorial map, that he would be interested in knowing a sectorial map. I would also be interested in knowing how far off the patients came from, because it's knowing the scenario in most of the Indian cities, it's really, the transportation is hard. It's hard to find an ambulance, and it's all government setup based. So it's not like we have ambulance just on standby for transporting such patients, ma'am.
Yeah, Rajat, I mean, whatever you are saying is quite fine, and we go with that, but we also respect our own research fraternity and our own setups where this study was done. So if they are mentioning that this all was achieved in 6 hours, I mean, we just accept that, yes, it was achieved in 6 hours. However, the fact that the baby came via transport which may not have been optimum, and his resuscitation where he was born was or was not optimum, and by the time he reached here when he was stabilized, it may have still been within 6 hours. But yes, all this has added to the insult, and we may have been enrolling babies who were actually sicker, or who were more asphyxiated, or who were in, probably heading towards severe encephalopathy than the ones who should have been really taken in. So Dr. Divakar's comment, I think, is very pertinent. The first study of this kind should have been restricted to babies, probably to the babies who were inborn. And maybe we would have had results which could have been different from what we are seeing right now. But thank you for your comment, Rajat. And I think we need young minds to think and, come up with the constructive criticism of whatever is being published or whatever is being written up. And that's how we are going to move ahead in a scientific manner.
Ma'am, I have
one more comment.
Sorry?
Ma'am, I would also like to know about the way forward, because if now the future RCTs enrolling neonates for HI follow the current position statement. So as you said, ma'am, we would be enrolling the most severest of the asphyxia neonates. So the probability of therapeutic hypothermia not showing any benefit as compared to the comparator arm would just increase. That would decrease the probability of us showing that actually this is beneficial. And so it would just give a global, as sir said, it would just give a global message, because if we would keep enrolling the sickest and the most severest of the neonates, eventually it would just we would just conclude that this is not beneficial.
Exactly. This is what the last slide said. But Rajat, I think the position statement probably is for providing service, for managing babies, rather than for doing a further RCT, because further RCTs should have a definition which is globally acceptable. And this is probably, they have given it so that this is for managing babies. So do not cool babies in LMICs if they do not follow all these criteria. So yes, you are right that we are stuck up. And if somebody cools a baby who did not meet these criteria, then you may be liable for a legal action. And if you cool a baby with all these criteria present and the baby doesn't do well, then you are again proving that same thing, that yes, therapeutic hypothermia is not good and should not be provided in LMC. So we need to actually find a way as to how do we move ahead. And one of the ways that I feel and I would have Dr. Divakar, Ali Melu and others tell that we should, I think, write to NNF what we feel about this, and a few mails should be going there talking about what the position statement is saying and what it should be saying, or how the process should be done, like what Veer said, that we should have something like a clinical practice guideline for instituting hypothermia in babies who have undergone perinatal asphyxia.
Ma'am, I have a doubt. Hello.
Yeah.
In these scenarios, we are thinking that the asphyxia might have been started earlier. So the critical period of primary energy failure has been already passed away. So some of the studies in the Western literature also showed that 3 hours versus 6 hours cooling time. And the beneficiary goes towards the 3 hours. In this helix trial, they have not actually mentioned about the subgroup analysis of which babies got started on 2 hours and what is the outcome of those babies, which babies got started therapy and what are the outcome at the babies of at 4 hours of life. So we need to think that therapy might be started little earlier in LMIC. What's your statement, ma'am?
No, so you have a point there, but we have to realize that when a trial is started, if we decide something a priori, that we have decided that we will look at babies who were cooled within 3 hours, vis-a-vis between 3 to 6 hours, then the different sites would actually note that. But once it is not decided a priori, that may or may not be noted, and it will be just that, okay, within 6 hours we were able to cool. So again, you are telling us and you are proving the point that there are more questions than answers that we have, and we need to look out for the answers. And one of the ways that I feel is we should write to the forum. People should write mail to them as to do we need to look at it again? Does it need to be revised? And how do we go forward in terms of providing therapeutic hypothermia to babies who are asphyxiated? So if there are, I see one hand up. Who is it? Somebody who's put up his hand. Okay, it's been taken down. So if there are no further questions, we will close the session. And thank you very much, Dr. Bala, for presenting it very lucidly. He's put in effort to analyze the study and also the position statement. So thank you very much for that. And I would thank everyone who have discussed and who have put forth their points. Dr. Divakar, Dr. Ali Melu, Dr. Gaurav, Dr. Veera Raghavan, Shikha, and Aritre, and Rajat. So thank you very much for this lucid discussion. And I think we should find a way forward. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Good night.